Selene can't stay for the whole session, so I'll introduce her now rather than at the end. She's running next week's session. This week's session is about how you weave together. I got confused for a second. How you weave together your resources and your vulnerabilities so that your resources hold your vulnerabilities. That's the purpose of this week's session. So this is session 5 in the creative mind process. And then session 6 is having brought your resources and weave them together with your vulnerabilities, with your difficulties, using your resources to hold your difficulties, to transform your difficulties into resources. Once you've done that, then the next step in the process, which is step 6 in the process, is how you then take the resourceful you, the generative you that holds your resources and additional resources forward into the future. And then Selene is going to run that session next week because I'm going to be on the Pembrokeshire coast, walking the footpath, resting and swimming in the sea. That's where I'm going to be next. So, Selene, just say a few words about yourself.
Sure. So let's see. I am a psychotherapist here in Santa Cruz, California, here in the mountains. I've been working with Stephen Gilligan since 1999, teaching often at his trance camp. And we just finished doing a 4-day supervision with him here. It was his first travel away since COVID, which was delightful and deep and wonderful. I am faculty at the Saybrook University's Mind-Body Medicine graduate program and work a lot with people from all over and from all different backgrounds to bring mind-body connection into whatever it is that they're working with out there in the world. And I really value Steve's work and the creative mind work. I value Julian and what he brings to this. We met in 1999 and have been crossing each other's path on and off since then. I work with clients and I work with groups and I do teach workshops as well. Working with movement a lot. I do a lot of work with movement, a lot of work with various experiential ways to connect with ourselves and each other and with whatever transpersonal realities are beyond that we may name in many different ways, but we
And I
can
can see
all find our way to.
I can see some transpersonal realities behind you.
You can. I've got Saraswati right there, and I've got Chen Rezik right there. And I'm very glad they're both here to help me.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. So thank you so much for doing next week, and it'll be really come and spend time with Selene next week because she's be a great person to give you a different perspective. Because each week we just cover the model again briefly, and she will of course take a slightly different perspective to the one that I've taken. So that will be another view of the model. So thank you so much for being willing to do that, Selene.
Glad to.
So the essential format for those of you who don't know is I'll do a short presentation, then we will have a guided meditation on the 7-step creative mind model, and then we will do an exercise in small groups about what we got from the meditation, and finally we'll have sharing and questions and answers at the end, and sometimes that's quite short, just depending on how time goes. So the first thing is very, very briefly, I'll go through the model because I've gone through it in previous weeks. And if you want to know more about the 7-step model, look at the videos from previous weeks that you will find in your email. So the first step is to get a body-mind connected state, a generative state, a state of meditation, body and mind, emotion and spirit, having all of you connected, because you're not just your mind, you're your body, your emotions, you are your spirit. And actually you're also the field, we're also a part of the biosphere. We wouldn't survive without the whole of Mother Nature. Every breath proves that. And we could take it further than that, but we are much, much more than just our ego minds. And then the second step in the meditation process is to then say, well, what do I want from this meditation? Just to bring to mind what it is that you want from the meditation. It could be, what do I want today? How do I want to be today? Or it could be, what does life want from me today? You can do it either way around. And then the third step is, and we will talk a little bit more about this today because I've got a new slide to show you, that to access all of your, as much of your psychological resources as you need for whatever it is that you're doing today. Our psychological resources are potentially infinite in variety. So we won't be accessing all of them at once, but there is so much possibility in terms of our resources, I'll talk more about that, that we can access the resources that will support us in our meditation today, but also we can build a habit of every day making sure that we're really well connected with our resources. It's such an important habit to have. And then as the next step in the process, but it may have come up earlier, these steps don't happen in sequence. They may happen, this is just an order that's good for teaching and good for beginners, but of course they may happen in a different order. At some points you may get short of breath or notice some anxiety or notice some feeling that doesn't sit as well as you would like with your intention. And so then you may access further resources to support yourself with that feeling. And that's a big part of the topic today. How do we use our resources to support ourselves in the feeling and transforming the feeling? How do we heal ourselves? How do we bring love and care to ourselves? How do we both get and understand and have compassion for our difficulty? And also, how do we hold our difficulty in a way that doesn't interfere with what we have to get on with in our lives? So that's the sort of the essence of that step. And today, of course, we're focusing on how do we weave all of this together. So in the last session, we focused a bit on obstacles and the beginning of a weaving process. Today, we're going to talk more about how the transformational step in this process. And then next week, Selene will say, well, having integrated all of this, having empowered yourself, both with your resources and the way in which you hold your resources, how do you bring this into the world? Imagine yourself walking forward in throughout the day, throughout the course of the day, or throughout the course of the week or the month, with these resources, with this new level of integration, with this new relationship with yourself. And then the final session that I will run in 2 weeks' time is about if you are supporting a change in yourself, if you are in the process of some transformation, you'll want to support that transformation on a daily basis. It's not enough to do these meditations once. It's really great to keep taking them deeper and supporting them and building them over a period of time. In general, I would say, and Steve Gilligan would say, and the positive psychology people would say, have a daily meditation, because if you get yourself aligned in yourself on a daily basis, you will communicate better, you will take appropriate levels of risk better, you will deal with difficulty better, you will be more successful, you will have better relationships. And so let's have that as a daily practice. And we'll talk about that during the 7th session in the series. And so just to talk again about the resources, I don't think I showed this to you last week. I've developed it since last week, which was to organize the resources based on what Gebser and Steve Gilligan call the evolutionary levels of awareness. And here I've organized them based on starting as close to your normal self as, your normal, in inverted commas, self, your normal everyday state. And so the individual mind is about the resources are every moment in your life that you are in the flow. And I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating so many times. If you just daydreamed about every time you related well, you performed well, you were in high performance, you rested well, you holidayed well, every time you were aligned in yourself, if you took all of those memories and brought them to the forefront of your life, to the forefront of your mind, your life would change. It's as simple as that. And in addition to that, it's really great to focus on your strengths and talents. What are the skills you have? What are the competencies you have? And to really see, hear, and feel times when you were using your competencies and your strengths, because that will build your self-esteem, that will build your self-confidence, that will help you get into the flow more easily. And on other courses, on other Wednesdays, we'll talk more about strengths. And you can just sit down with a piece of paper and work out your strengths for yourself, or you can do psychometric tests, or you can do 360 interviews. There are lots of ways of doing it. And then something that's super important is to remember those people and saints. We'll talk about saints in a moment, but to remember those people who see and believe in you, and to really build a circle of supporters around yourself in your mind's eye, in your psyche, in your inner world, that you can call on at any time. And that's a really important part of building our resources, having access to our resources. Think of all the moments in your life when someone saw you and said yes, someone believed in you, someone trusted you, someone cared about you. All of those people are inner resources that can help you be the best that you can be. So the next level is community of mind, which we could also call collective mind. You could use a number of different terms for it. The phrase community of mind is interesting because actually, if I've got my individual ego mind, there are many different parts inside me that are not just part of my everyday persona or my everyday ego. So the community of mind is inside me, all the different parts of me. You know, the parts of me that I don't normally access, the parts of me that I neglect, the parts of me that I dislike. There are many parts of us that form the community of mind that you call yourself. For resources, particularly, we're focusing on those parts of your inner community of mind that you wouldn't access so often. For example, perhaps the warrior or the playful you, or the very sensitive you. There may be parts of you that you don't access so often that if you bring them to mind, will act as a resource for you in a particular situation. And of course, also, as Kathleen and Belonda and I have been discussing this week, a super important resource is music. You know, hearing your favorite music, or feeling in your body a dance that really empowers you. And of course, it could be an individual dance, but it also could be a group dance or a community dance. There are some communities in the world that use dance as a way of building the village, building the community. And those sorts of rituals, if you like, are really important resources to us to remember ourselves as a part of the dance of life, the dance of our community. And of course, there's art as well, and there's poetry. And there are those activities, those ritual activities that really give us a sense of empowerment in ourselves. And of course, we also then have, you know, the ancestors, and I talked a bit about that last week, about my own ancestors last week. But to really look at what are the really strong positive qualities that you've received through your different lineages, and to really take advantage of that, or to know when they're useful. My ancestors did some not very nice things because my ancestors were part of the British Empire, but there were also some really great things about British culture that I've received from them. And so it's really being able to select those ancestors that can really support you and be helpful for you in whatever it is that you need to engage in. There's your culture, your own the culture of where you live, and perhaps slightly broader. You know, for me, I've got British culture, haven't I? But I've also got European culture. I consider myself to be a European rather than just a Brit. And then there are worldly archetypal forms, people and figures in the world who can support me, who can help me, who I can think of and be inspired by. And an example I often use is Nelson Mandela, you know, the dogged persistence he had when he was sent to prison to say, I want to understand the Afrikaner mind and therefore I will make friends with the Afrikaner guards in the prison, is really something that reminds me of the power of dogged persistence and a positive mindset. But of course, we can also call on all the cultures of the world as well, which is such a wonderful and exciting thing. That even just the hint of an idea from another culture can really inspire us. A few weeks ago, someone was talking about South American tribes who will tell people, it's not that we need to reconnect with nature. We are nature. We've never been separate from nature. We are nothing else but nature. And just that little idea from a tribe that lives in the Amazon rainforest is really helpful to me in, so sort of Western mind has sort of really separated ourselves from nature. And then one step in between is to say, I must reconnect with nature. But what if we remembered that we've never ever been separate from nature? So there are many different resources in the community of mind. That's why you can say infinite resources, because there's so much that we can connect to. Every day I read or hear something about something that inspires me, and I can invite that into my own being as something that I can take action on. And then, of course, there's nature. And again, there was a conversation with Belondra and Kathleen and various other people. And so animals, particularly intelligent animals, can really have a massive impact on us. And of course, Willow, the Labradoodle, is one of my mentors, and I could tell stories about him, but I won't right now because I want to keep us moving. There's the biosphere, there's the trees, being close to an ancient tree, or to feel the power of a river or a waterfall, or to meditate by the ocean, to remember times that you were by the ocean, or to remember times when you had been on holiday long enough to really relax into the ground. And then, of course, maybe you've had a really powerful, empowering moment looking at the night sky, or wondering about the scale of the universe. Maybe, even through intellectual thought, you've been inspired. The idea for me that it wasn't just a big bang that started this universe, but it could have been a big bounce. That there was a contracting, some physicists believe there was a contracting universe that contracted down to a singularity and then bounced back out again. And therefore, there are big bounces all the way back in time and all the way forward into the future. For me, that inspires me in some deep way. Actually, it takes me into the sacred and the spiritual. And I've separated worldly archetypes under community of mind from spiritual archetypes because for me there's something particularly important about the saints that represent archetypal forms, beings that represent archetypal forms. All the different Buddhas of Tibetan Buddhism, Jesus and all the Christian saints, all the figures of the Old Testament, all the saints of all the different traditions, the Sufi masters, the people from goddess practices. And I think it's important really to have male and female saints, community of saints. And what's great about having a spiritual practice that is your own personal practice rather than belonging to a particular religion or tradition is that you can bring in saints from different traditions. I have spiritual archetypes from different traditions who both, not only do they support me in my inner life, but they also talk to each other and hang out with each other. And so that for me is a very, very enjoyable and pleasurable part of my inner life. And then the final one under spirit. I've called it the ever-present origin from which all arises. You could call it source. You could call it presence itself. Dujum Rinpoche, a Buddhist master, said that awareness of nowness is the Buddha. So those who meditate may have had moments when there was no longer a separation between you and awareness, you and experience. Everything was one. And if you've had flashes of that, you'll know what I'm talking about. A sense of the oneness of life. That, everything is God. And we are, to use the Christian mystics, we are God, or we're a part of God. But the word God, of course, is a difficult word for some people. And so therefore, sometimes I use words like source. I'm not really interested in religious traditions as much as what the religious traditions point to. And then finally, we've got integral mind, which is the you that can experience everything, all of the above. And particularly if you're in a generative state, in a body-mind connected state, being present with all of the possibility of all of the different sorts of resources is an amazing thing. And so this journey that we're on of integrating all of these different levels, because all of these different levels not only represent all of consciousness in human history, but before human history. So we're drawing on the development of consciousness from time out of mind. And then, of course, we bring all of those resources to transforming difficulty. But the final slide, and the new slide today, is I particularly want to mention it in relationship to today. And this is a key part of creative mind. It's a key part of Steve Gilligan's generative change work and the self-relations work, and the work that goes back to Milton Erickson. And so it's this sort of four really important ideas, or really actually perhaps three important ideas. The first principle is, of course, you welcome and support, who you are and what you bring. But secondly, you welcome and support the other, the opposite, or the neglected self, or the parts of you that you don't want to bring. So you have an intention, that's the top left box. There's something that you want to grow and change, but there's also perhaps the part of you that doesn't want to grow and change, or that feels left out, or is resisting change, or that isn't being taken into account, or sabotages you. And so that is so important to welcome that. So just welcoming that, just including the elephant in the room is a helpful process. Now, if you can include the neglected self, and you can welcome that with a warm, loving heart. And so therefore, an important part of the process of accessing resources, of having your inner supporters, is to open your warm, loving heart so that you can bring your warm, loving heart to yourself. And it's that warm, loving heart, that compassionate, tolerant, understanding heart that can welcome and transform any inner difficulties, that conflict between the you that wants to be great, that is, has a real sense of, how great you can be, and the you that is wounded or hurt or resistant or doesn't believe in possibility, it doesn't believe in the possibility of your life. And so that we can welcome all of that. And really today is about this third step, building a relationship between the resources and the vulnerability and the difficulty, and building a relationship that at the very least can hold your difficulty and vulnerability and crankiness or fear or trauma or whatever it happens to be, or your ancestral woundedness, that could at least hold that, and perhaps with a bit of time, with more resources, with some skillfulness, can transform it into a gift or an asset. And I won't spend a long time on my own story, but because my mother had post-traumatic stress syndrome from the Second World War, I didn't bond with her, and I didn't, and the carers continually changed, and I had a difficult relationship with my twin brother, and the emotional difficulty of my childhood meant that I had to get involved in personal development 50 years ago. So I've been, I've been involved in personal development since I was 15, and therefore all that I bring to my work comes as a gift that came out of the difficulties of my childhood. That's the final stage, the gift. And then, of course, this really important thing from Milton Erickson that Steve carries so well is that in addition to all of this, there is so much, 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 much more. There is infinite possibility. So in the classical world, the world of Newtonian physics, the world of the ego, where I had a wounded childhood, and then I've done some work on myself, and that means I can be this in the future. It's a world of cause and effect. It's a sort of quite a linear world, view of ourselves. This is what happened to me, therefore I have these wounds, this is what it's like. But in the quantum field, anything is possible, anything can be transformed, and the world can be shaped any way that it arises. I can't say any way that you want to shape it, because that gives too much power to the conscious mind and to the ego. But there is so much infinite possibility, and the question is, how do we tap into that infinite possibility in a creative and an important way? So, that's pretty much what I want to say from the point of view of looking at the slides. But now I just want to talk a little bit about how we weave the resources that we access with the difficulties. So the first level is that you can just have so much, so many resources that you can just hold a loving space for the difficulty in yourself. That's sort of the first level of it. And then there are deeper levels as well. I'm just finding my notes now, actually. So that you can, you can just feel those resources and their support, helping you hold the difficulty in yourself. You can also imagine, for example, healing light or healing energy coming from those resources. There are many different traditions that will allow you, that will give you a way of doing that. You can imagine, I can imagine light coming down through the center of my head and feeling wounded places in myself, or light coming into my heart. And all of that is super powerful, but there's a danger that it can miss out the part about building a relationship with those places in yourself. And that's why, even though, there are not younger, there is not a 5-year-old inside me. If you take me on a surgeon's table and cut me open, you won't find a 5-year-old inside. There isn't lots of different ages inside, yet it can seem that way. The difficult feeling can be very, very associated with a particular age. And it can be really helpful to not only have the resources of the people who believe in you and support you and are wise, your wise elders, your teachers, to have their support, but to have their support for the wise adult you and their support for you opening your heart. So I often, when I'm doing this work with people, I have them bring those resources into their own hearts so that your own heart opens. And then you can bring your own heart to yourself. And many of you here are in caring professions. You're really good at bringing your heart to other people. You may not always be so good at bringing your heart to yourselves. I mean, and of course it's easier to bring one's heart to other people, particularly if they're paying you money. You can sort of, for a limited amount of time, I can love you. You pay me some money and I'll love you. But when you have to live with yourself, some of your own difficulties, you may have more difficulty being patient with yourself. It's quite understandable. So you bring, so really having a practice of opening one's heart to oneself And then with all of your life experience, with your wise adult mind and with your warm, tender heart, to bring support to those other levels in yourself. And sometimes it's really helpful to, to be, the best parent in the world, supporting the 5-year-old child in you and talking to the child in you that needs support. Because if the child in you has picked up some negative beliefs about herself or himself from an adult figure through language, it may be really helpful for you to dispute those negative beliefs and to talk through with the child in yourself. It's such an important idea that the 5-year-old in you may not know yet that your parents can have bad days or have difficult lives or have inherited difficult stuff from their parents. So the child sort of can very often, right at the beginning, just thinks, I'll learn everything that's out there. I'll learn all the good stuff. I mean, that's what's amazing about being a child, isn't it? I just learn. Unfortunately, the child can't discriminate between the good stuff and the toxic stuff. And sometimes it's really helpful to go back to the 5-year-old or the 4-year-old or the 7-year-old, whatever age it is, the 13-year-old, and say, actually, the messages you got from the people you trusted were not healthy messages. And to really communicate that with yourself. And it doesn't mean that they were necessarily bad people, they were just screwed up themselves. But to really educate that place in you, that those messages were not true messages, and and then you can say, well, what would be a belief about myself and or the world that would work just as well or even better, that would be more helpful. And really, quite often, it's useful to say to oneself, any negative message that I give to myself, any undermining message I give is unhealthy, period. One of the ways you know that it's a toxic message is if there's a message inside you that undermines you, it's not coaching, it's not helpful, it's not useful. It's as simple as that. Anytime you hear a voice that makes you feel less confident or more disempowered, that's not a healthy voice. That's not a coach. That's not a useful supporter. So we have to really learn to be a great coach for ourselves, to be a great coach it's a good phrase, actually. Great coach for ourselves. A sort of ideal loving parent for ourselves. Of course, no parents can be perfect, particularly in the modern world where we don't live in small communities where all the adults support the child rearing of the community. We live in a very, very difficult world for parents. But all the same, for ourselves, we can learn to be the best friend, the sponsor for the wound, the places in ourselves that got stuck at earlier ages. And of course, it's not true that it's all that, we all have inner children. It's not a truth, it's a metaphor. But it's a really useful metaphor. It's a really useful approach. And of course, it's really worth mentioning here that one of the limits of a lot of modern psychotherapy, because psychotherapy is still very, very young as a tradition, is that a lot of psychotherapy doesn't really deal with the body very well. So there's somatic experiencing. There's a lot of new somatic psychotherapies, because if the emotional wound happened before you had language is not going to work very well for healing that emotional wound. And therefore, actually bringing your generative state, your coach state, your warm, tender heart, and your resources, the feeling of that, bringing the feeling of that in your body to a place in you that physically hurts without actually knowing necessarily what the experience was that created that hurt. I have feelings in my body that I spend time with that are painful, that I know are psychosomatic, and don't know where they came from. And of course, just to be aware, we don't know exactly how far back we have awareness, but certainly we experience things in the womb, and we can be wounded in the womb. My mother was very anxious about having children, I'm pretty sure that I experienced that while I was in the womb. So that isn't, we don't deal with, language doesn't help us very easily with that. And that's why this somatic part of creative mind and these traditions is so important. And there are actually, for those of you who have massive trauma, there are traditions that specialize in the somatic aspects of bringing somatic healing to trauma, to be able to experience it and heal it within the body. But for the run-of-the-mill, everyday, daily practice, let's talk about that. That we get ourselves in a body-mind connected state, in a generative state, body, mind, emotion, spirit connected state, whatever method you use, and I'll check in with you on that in the final session about, do you have a strong enough method for getting that connected state? And then open your heart. Use resources to open your heart. And then have your heart hold the tender places in yourself. And some of those tender places, if you bring a little love to that place in yourself, that place, and you may say, hey, fine, I've felt some love, it's cool, let's rock. And there may be other places in you that have been stuck for such a long time. You have to be super, super patient over a long period of time. Actually, I remember a story. I was in a hospital doing counselling for people in a hospital, and this woman told me how she'd been in a very, very abusive marriage, and she divorced him, and then she got a new boyfriend, and they ended up living together, and he was incredibly respectful. And after about 17 years, he said to her, will you marry me? And she said, first she said yes, and then she paused and looked frightened, and she said, will you promise that you won't beat me? So even after 17 years, so some of these places in ourselves, we have to be very, very patient with them. And I think one of the difficulties of life is when you're in your teens and your 20s, you think you rule the world, you can do anything you want in a short amount of time. When you get to 50, some of you here are 50, when you suddenly realize it takes an awful lot longer than you thought. And that is a part of the compassion we have to have for ourselves with the human condition, our physiology, our muscles. What makes us so sensitive in our physical bodies is also what can hold on to pain for long, long, long periods of time. We have to be very, very compassionate, because the beauty of human sensitivity is balanced with the difficulty of human sensitivity and frailty and fragility. And so perhaps a wise person is someone who, after many, many years, has discovered, that they're at peace with their own woundedness, they're at peace with their own vulnerability, they're at peace with their own fragility, and that they understand that that's a part of the human condition. And so as a daily practice, it may be that there are places in you that you will have to just bring love to every day for years. I think the question is, if it's really disruptive in your life, then you may need a coach or a therapist to support you in it. However good you are at your own individual practice, sometimes it's more powerful to have another person who is specializing in the coach position. And of course, you're doubling the, two brains are better than one. Two nervous systems are better than one. And so don't be shy about going to a practitioner, another practitioner, to support you when that's the most useful resource. Sometimes actually having a live human being in the room with you is the best resource. In fact, that's a very, very important resource for all of us. Let me just word of warning here, we keep talking about inner resources. Actually, outer resources are super important. Your tribe, your community, the people you talk to. Can you share who do you share your difficulty with? Who do you share your inner secrets with? And that's why communities like the Skiros community, the Life Talent community, the Creative Mind community are really important, because there may be people that you've never met that you've shared your deepest heart with, online in the last year. And actually, this is a good moment to remind you that I read some research on this. If you don't have contact with people for a period of time, I can't quite remember what the research is, um, then you lose the feeling of being friends with them. So there's a danger that after a year of lockdown, there may be people who you spent time with before who you've lost your connection with a bit. And really, my advice to you is think about who it was before lockdown that really felt supportive to you, and make sure you don't be lazy, get in contact with them, rebuild that connection. Really an important thing, because these long periods of disconnection, we bring up our own abandonment stuff or our own attachment issues from early in life. The way we connect with people is based on how we connected with our parents as babies, or our parenting figures as babies. That's still a part of the mechanisms that help us connect. So look to your tribe, look to your sangha, look to your community. Make sure you have really powerful external resources to support you as well. And by the way, folks, don't think that there's any psychology or psychotherapy or coaching guru who doesn't need that support. We are all dependent on other people. We all need to share our hearts with other people. So that's really sort of the key thing, to bring tenderness to ourselves. So let's do a meditation on that, and then let's do questions and answers afterwards. Okay, so make yourselves comfortable. Actually, one thing I will say now, very often I take you straight into the exercise afterwards, and I don't give enough of a briefing. In the exercise, one person talks and the other 2 or 3 listen. And you listen with your heart, with your warm, tender heart, and you don't make comments, you don't give coaching, you don't give advice. You listen and you can say, tell me more, and not much more. Right at the end, if you have a thought, you can give it to them right at the end. But it's really a chance for one person to share, and everybody be really attentive. You can't run off to the loo or do your email or anything of that sort while the other person is sharing. You just be super present. Such a powerful thing about the human consciousness, that we can get into mirror neuron sort of rapport with each other. We can get into connection with each other. We can get into sync with each other, even through this strange medium called Zoom and the internet. And so really experiment with that when we go to the exercise afterwards. So let's do a meditation. And I'm going to use Betty Erickson's 4-3-2-1, because I think that's just a really simple and great way to connect down deep into ourselves, and also to broaden out wider. So always what I do is I take a deep breath and I just notice, get really present, notice what I see, what I hear, what I feel. Just attend to this moment. Yeah. And just take a deep breath, notice how you are. And pay attention to 4 things that you see. And for those of you who haven't done this much before, a really clever tip is to focus on one point. For example, something on your screen or something of that sort. Put your focus there, and then soften your eyes so that you've got your peripheral vision. And then you can notice 4 things while keeping your eyes still. That will take you deeper. Peripheral vision itself creates a generative state, a body, mind, emotion, spirit state. Evokes that. And then I always say notice 4 things that you hear, but in practice I listen to 5 things. So my ritual, it's nice to create a ritual for yourself. My ritual, I listen outside the window, and even if I can't hear anything, there's an auditory quality to not hearing something. Then I listen for house sounds. Then I listen for any sounds in the room, such as computer sounds or echo. Then I listen inside my body. Perhaps it's quiet enough to hear my heart. I can certainly hear my breathing. And then I just listen for an inner voice. Is there a radio station chatting away in my head? What's the news right now? What's she saying? What's he saying? Listen to it as a voice that's really separate from you. You're much, much more than that voice. You listen to it like you would listen to someone at a networking meeting. Interested, compassionate, but you don't necessarily believe it. And sometimes that voice is reflecting a feeling. So that's interesting. It gives you information, but it's not necessarily the truth. And then notice 4 things that you feel. And it can be great to include skin, it can be great to include muscle. Pick a big muscle. Check your emotions. What am I feeling emotionally? And one more thing. And notice 3 things that you see. And 3 things that you hear. And when you're listening, just be aware that you don't get too involved in your internal voice. Observe it from a distance. One of the purposes of including everything you see, everything you hear, everything you feel is to balance things out a bit and not be dominated by that talkative little voice. So notice 3 things that you hear, perhaps other than your inner voice. What else do you hear? And 3 things that you feel. And 3 things that you see. Three things that you hear. Keep listening for new things. 3 things that you feel. Two things that you see. And I like to vary between close and distant in my peripheral vision. 2 things that I hear. Two things that I feel. One thing that I see. One thing that I hear. One thing that I feel. And then it can be great to put your attention onto your breathing as a place to hold your attention. Really tuning into the fine detail of breathing. Every little sensation. And what if you could hold in awareness everything you see, everything you hear, everything you feel, in every moment. And what does life want from you today? What do you want to get from this meditation? What would it look like? How would it sound? How would it feel? And perhaps you'd like to reinforce this intention with a small gesture. How would you represent this as a physical gesture? And let's invite our community of sponsors, of supporters, the people who believe in us, believe in our potential, care about us. Perhaps people we know well, but perhaps people who had an impact that we only met once. Perhaps currently in your life, perhaps from your childhood. Perhaps a teacher or a sponsor or a guide. Perhaps a saint, someone you've never met, an archetypal figure, a famous person, a character from a book or a movie, an animal. Or something from nature. Allow these to come to mind. The more often you do these meditations, the more easily these resources will come to mind. And it's really great every time we do this meditation to discover something new, to discover a new supporter. See their faces, or if you only have one person, see their face, or one saint, see their face, hear the words that they say to you in support of you. Feel how that feels. Even if I have a circle of supporters, figures step forward and speak individually or touch me physically, the others can stand back. And if maybe you only need one supporter right now, or maybe you find you have more. And perhaps there are spiritual saints, archetypes that are present. Figures, or something representing source, representing grace. We have never been separate from source. Even if you felt separate from source, you're like the long lost child of source who when you lean towards source, source will lean back towards you. But you will know right now which resources, which supporters are helpful to you, are supporting you right now. And you can pay attention to the ones in your inner world. I'm just making suggestions. And I want you to invite your supporters, to give you love. I want you to connect with supporters that really show you love, who care about you, who believe in you. So you can feel it in your heart. You can feel them. You can feel their care in your heart. To just bathe. And it could be love, or it could be belief in you. It could be care about you. It could just be being seen for who you are. And then just notice your heart. I always imagine my heart beaming out. But when I do this meditation, it beams down into my belly, my guts, my body, my throat. And there's a curiosity there. What needs to be touched with love? Just bringing my heart patiently, carefully, sensitively. What needs healing, or what needs to be seen or heard? Or what needs to be touched with love? And to just bring that compassion, to bring that wisdom, to bring the experience of your life in support of that love to that place in yourself. And you can ask that feeling if it seems appropriate. How old is this feeling? How old are you? It may be that the feeling originated or became intense at a particular time, like a trauma or a mild trauma, a shocking incident. And therefore the feeling is connected with a particular age. And isn't that interesting? Or it may be that there's something that you're longing for. A very nice exercise, little process to do is to say, what's this woundedness today? What's this feeling today? What's the longing that this feeling has? What can my warm, tender heart do about it? How can my warm, tender heart support me? And my warm, tender heart has its own supporters, the circle of supporters around my warm, tender heart. So I can always call on a particular supporter or a particular expert or a saint. Or someone from the natural world or something from the natural world. And we're not trying to change the feeling. We're just actually welcoming and accepting. If a feeling gets welcomed and accepted, it will transform of its own accord. And I wonder if there's some ritual that you'd like to engage in with this place in you. You could be holding this place, hugging it, or it could be whispering in a younger you's ear. Or it could be dancing together. Or it could be praying together, feeling a higher power. Or perhaps a resource like a very, very old tree, hundreds of years old, a wise elder tree. Comes close that you can feel the energy. And those words that I use that are helpful, you can pay attention to. But more important is to pay attention to your own inner process. How do you build the relationship with yourself? How are you building this relationship? How can you bring sweetness to yourself? And of course, I've mentioned love. But perhaps you need your inner warrior who's fierce, who sets boundaries, who takes action, who can speak to others from a powerful place or an honest place. Or perhaps it's the queen or the king who has authority. That's needed here. Or it could be the playful you. Perhaps it's play. Or wizardry, or magic, or comedy that's needed. wonder which of your multitude of resources and experiences and people that you've met in your life will be most helpful to help you be aligned in yourself for the rest of today. And it's really beautiful if this has movement as well, touch or movement. It's sort of up to you. I meditate quite still, others need movement. And so with this new level of relationship in yourself, this new connecting with yourself, imagine taking this forward in the hours and days that come. Imagine growing and building this relationship, going forward into whatever situations you need to go into. Take this new relationship, this new way of supporting yourself forward, allowing it to grow and continue. And then you can imagine how it would be if you did this meditation tomorrow, if you continued to grow this tomorrow. And I want you slowly to reorientate yourself to the room, staying deeply connected in yourself. But getting ready to work in a group. And so it's going to be in the groups of 4, 6 minutes per person to share your experience of the meditation. And in groups of 3, 8 minutes per person to share your experience of the meditation. Listen to the person for this period of time, bring your heart and your warmth to them. And round 1 starts now. All the rooms are opening now. So good, great. So sharings, how was that for you? Questions? Questions about how you apply this to yourself? Let's hear from new people if possible. People who I've got some good friends here, and they always ask the first questions because they don't want me to be left in silence. But actually, I don't mind silence. So
Actually, I'll say something because I was just saying something to Cherise before we came back into the room, and I was just saying that doing these meditations, people aren't automatically coming into around the campfire with me or whatever, using these people that are your resources. And Cherise was just saying to me, well, maybe it's not people that have said they believe in you. And I said, well, what's that about? Why can't I think of people that believe in me? And Cherise said, if you think about something, they don't not automatically come immediately, and it may be that it sort of takes a while, and it's more about people that have made demands on you, or if another way of looking at it, or people have asked for help in some way from you rather than saying that they believe in you. And I just thought that was quite interesting.
So how are you feeling right now?
How am I feeling?
Yeah, how are you feeling emotionally?
A bit tired, actually.
I think maybe that's a cover for feeling something more difficult.
Okay.
That would be my guess. That would be my guess. Um, so what does come naturally to you
What
in
what
terms of
comes next?
resources? In terms of resources, what did come to mind?
Well, today I wouldn't say an awful lot, but generally when I'm doing the meditation, what comes to mind? Well, I don't know really. I've just noticed that I don't automatically feel that there are people there that believe in me, really, or that's what I feel.
That's a sad thing.
I don't know why that is, or whether I'm just making that up. I don't know, but it just
No, no,
doesn't.
no, don't wonder about whether you're making it up or not, because even if you're making it up, if it's the truth for you, it's the truth for you.
Right.
You know, what you believe to be true in your inner world is true, you know.
Okay.
So the thing to do is be very tender in your heart about it. Be very loving and caring about this, and just loving and caring and tender and curious. And it could be a number of different things. There are some people, and I don't know which is you, but this, and by the way, this conversation is useful for everybody in the group. So there are some people who are more half glass of water half empty than glass of water half full. So some people will just immediately remember everybody who doesn't love them, care about them, and believe in them. You know, so that's one sort of difficult strategy, and that just needs to be retrained. That is, one just needs to say, okay, thank you for coming, but you're not what, this is not your X time. And then think about people who, sometimes people who love me is too big. I could say people who care about me. People who cared about me once, they looked me in the eye once and I could see that they cared. Or, so you would really reduce it, people who at that moment believed in me.
Caring and belief is not the same thing,
No, it's
really.
not, because I'm giving a range of options.
Oh,
Caring,
right. Okay.
trusted, and belief. Basically, when I say belief, I mean believing that you will grow and develop, believing in your ability to grow and develop, and also learning these. You see, I've been doing this stuff since 1985, so it sort of seems easy to me. But if you're new to evoking stuff in your inner world, it takes some time to learn that. And then also some people are very visual, and some people are more likely to hear the voices, and other people will get the feeling first. So you have to just be really interested in the way that you go about it. And it may be that it's not people, but for example, I know there's one person on this Zoom. She doesn't get. She gets archetypal, people from films and storybooks and stuff of that sort. Some people it will be saints, and some people it will be their pet animal, there's an invitation here to everyone to listen to all these ideas, and then slowly over a period of time allow these ideas to develop. That there was once a teacher who just was really encouraging. That would be a good one. There was once a boss who mentored me, who thought I was worth spending time on. There was once a kid who just would see me and throw themselves into my arms. They just trusted me and loved me so much. There once was a friend, and so just to build a habit. So daydreaming about the people who believe in your potential, have believed in your potential, who care about you, who understand you, who see you, who enjoy spending time with you. Spending time building your memories of them, remembering them, seeing their faces, hearing their voices, feeling how that feels is a really useful pursuit. Daydreaming is to be encouraged. Or there could be some other block to remembering these things. I can't tell with you, Judith. Something to be curious about. Or a saint, you know, perhaps as a saint, you know, spiritual figure, a teddy bear. I muted everyone because someone else was talking in the background, but you can unmute yourself, Judith, if you have something else to say.
I haven't really. No, that's interesting to hear that. Yeah, I'm sure it's probably just practice. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Great question. Who else has got a question or a comment? We'll take one more question or comment.
I have a question about archetype.
Yes.
Can you elaborate it and how to find your archetype? You can feel it, or you can think about, or you can be reminded.
I mean, I wouldn't say that, you know, I'm not someone who talks about helping people find their archetypes. There may be some nice, you know, New Age workshop. You have an archetype, and if you pay me some money, we'll tell you what your archetype is. But that's not my school of thought. And I think really, truthfully, I use the word archetype more generally than Carl Jung used it. So, you know, archetypes are these sort of pure qualities that are universal: love, the warrior, playfulness, perhaps the king, the queen, all of those, you know, those sort of pure qualities that can sometimes come in a human form. But then I use it to describe, you know, Superman and Superwoman and people from Kung Fu movies and the little princess from, you know, all of those characters, to use it for those sorts of principles, people who embody particular principles. And then I think of Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or, you know, Winston Churchill on a good day, you know, all of those people embodying certain types of quality. So it's really about, you know, what are the qualities that you want in your life? And so I use the word archetype quite loosely. We're on time, so I'd like to go for everybody to unmute themselves and just to take a moment for everybody to just say a word or a phrase about how you feel right now.
Ooh. Refreshed. Lovely.
Relaxed.
Released.
Full of good energy.
Confident.
On our universe.
Calmness.
Thank you.
Back home.
Grateful.
Enthusiastic.
Grateful.
Grateful.
More
Yes.
at peace.
Grateful.
If you felt
Serene.
serene, if you felt, who said serene?
Barbara.
Great.
Other
If you felt
Barbara.
someone spoke over you, say it again, say it again.
With serene, resourceful.
Anyone else?
Thankful and grateful.
Clear.
Thank you.
Joyful, thank you.
Curious.
Hi.
Thank
Hello?
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was beautiful and enlightening. Thank you.
Great, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.
Julian, have a nice holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your time
Yes.
off, Julian.
Look after Celine.
You will.
Okay, we will. Enjoy the ocean.
Great, thank
Enjoy
you.
your time in the
The
sun.
sea.
Yeah. Enjoy nature.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The sound of the sea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, everybody, thank you.
Yeah.